Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Outside Looking In, the podcast series wherein I, Samson Folk, talk about the whole league basically with 29 separate people about their team, about the Raptors, so that everyone can have kind of a consensus on what, the apparatus of the NBA media sphere thinks of the Raptors, which is good, and so that you slowly, trickly figure out, about the league at large. Today, we're talking about the Miami Heat with Nekias Duncan, who, of course, has written at WNBA.com, who, of course, is half of the Dunker Spot podcast. That is under the JJ Redick umbrella. The Raptors were very nearly under the JJ Redick umbrella, if I remember correctly. Nekias, how you doing, man?
I am doing well on this, I guess, Friday, trying to remember what day it is. Like, we were joking before the pod, like, I'm deep in, like, WNBA stuff right now, since that season's still going on. Playoffs just started not too long ago. I was like, man, I got to turn the NBA brain back on. And I especially have to turn the Heat brain back on, since Damian Lillard things may actually be happening soon. I guess we'll see what happens on that front. Very exciting times, but I'm doing well.
Good. I think this is a unique opportunity just to compare and contrast the WNBA and the WNBA since you're here. When I think of the WNBA, I think of like a few differences. Like if the ball goes into like a super deep seal, the ball will probably end up going back out. Like if there's a collapse to the 3 point line, and there's like a lot of really great like ping passes that enter the middle of the court. Whereas in the NBA, it's a lot more likely that if it enters the paint, like the guy who's got the ball there isn't going to keep pinging the ball around. That's like a big difference I noticed. The shooting across the board is obviously so high level in the WNBA, but what do you notice as differences between the two styles?
I think the post point is an interesting one, especially in light of some of the entry pass discourse that we got recently with a former WNBA player. We'll leave that there. Um, but no, like that's an interesting one. I think for me, teams feel a lot more aggressive on the W side defensively. Like you think of the Sun, you think of the Sparks. The Aces will ramp it up sometimes. Chicago's another team that'll do it. And like on the NBA, it feels like it's very condensed to like Toronto, Minnesota with Cat.
The Thunder, I guess, as well too. Yeah.
Yeah, but like even with the Thunder, like it feels more like Jalen's more like at a high drop and like they'll switch a ton. But it feels like there's more aggression across the board in the W front. Steve makes the comment all the time. There are a lot more unders in the W as well, since the shooting is high level to your point. But I think we're still waiting on the true like pull up shooting revolution from three at the very least. A lot of mid range pull up shooters. So still waiting on that, so teams can get a little more comfortable ducking under some screens. But the W is also really good at rescreening against that under and getting their guards downhill. So like that's a fun little back and forth. Um, and I think in general, just there's still more post play in the W, just
Yep.
on a basic level than on the NBA side. Like the NBA will still does it, obviously, will use their bigs as hubs. But on the W side, you get the hubs, and also here's Brittany Griner with 12, 14, 15 post up possessions a game. Here's rookie Aaliyah Boston, who can feast in the low or the mid post. Asia Wilson's another one, though she's trending more to her face up game this year. But like there are just a lot more of that. There's a lot more of that in the W side.
Who is the most WNBA style NBA star, and who is the most NBA style WNBA star?
Ooh, that's a fun one. The most NBA style W star would probably be. That's a good question. I guess it's probably Stewie, since she's like Miss Versatility. You just kind of use her, move her around literally everywhere, and that also also flows on the other end of the floor as well. Very switchable. Can work on the back end as a rim protector. Can switch all over the place on ball as well. So maybe Stewie for that comp. As far as the W style NBA star, um, hmm, it might be. It may not be the best answer, but like I see so much of Kelsey Mitchell and Bradley Beal and vice versa. So that's probably the one that I immediately come to, just with how they work off of screens, their ability to decelerate, the way they work the mid range game. Just their pick and roll cadence is similar. Their driving cadence is similar. Kelsey's gotten more.
She never misses the top foot on the closeout, does she?
She does. She does not. She does not.
Yeah.
So like that's probably the closest one I have there, at least off the top of my head.
Yeah, I didn't give you any heads up on this question, so I'm free to take any answers. There was no like, okay, think of this powerfully with your brain for 2 days. Something that everyone has been thinking probably not very powerfully about, but about for many, many days. Damian Lillard. I don't want to spend more than 5 minutes on this, because there's actual basketball to talk about. But he says, like, send me to Miami. We're talking about Miami. Dame is a player of significant consequence. Why, is that a game changer from Miami if it happens? And what do you expect if they manage to pull it off? The names that are going out the other door.
I think you want one because he's really freaking good at basketball, but two, the way that he's really freaking good at basketball is something that Miami needs. Now, to the degrees in which Miami needs it has been a conversation among Heat Twitter because they need a pull-up shooter, they need a dynamic guard. Do they need top 12 player in the league, Damian Lillard, or do they just need someone? Do they just need healthy Tyler Hero or someone a little bit better than Tyler Hero to go over the hump?
Kyle Lowry, sure.
Yeah, no, that would also help. Kyle stays healthy and the pull-ups going for him. But the degrees has been a conversation, but the Heat need a dynamic pull-up threat. And if they are able to get Damian Lillard in the building, barring injury, you're just going to get the best season out of Bam Adebayo that you've seen offensively. I don't know exactly what happens to his hub usage, but as a pick and roll, screen and dive, screen and short roll big, it just unlocks so much of his game. Having someone that teams have to commit extra eyeballs to. You can't just go over on Damian Lillard. You have to go over with help peeled in. And just changing the geometry of the court that way, I think will open up Bam as a roller and as a short roll playmaker in a way that he hasn't been able to do so consistently in his Heat career. That takes some of the offensive creation burden off of Jimmy Butler. If they're able to keep Tyler Hero out of the deal somehow, that takes some of the creation burden off of him, whether he starts or if he goes back to the 6-man role, I don't know. But you don't have to rely on him. You have to be the pull-up guy. You have to be the scorer to complement Jimmy Butler. Now he can slide down the hierarchy, and it makes it easier. Yeah. And also, if you do have a lineup with Dame and Tyler and Jimmy and Bam on the floor at the same time, just on the perimeter, Tyler's probably getting your third best perimeter defender. And that just changes so much of he doesn't have the great bursts, he doesn't have the shiftiest of handles, et cetera, et cetera. If he's going against your third best defender, he's probably going to win a lot of those matchups against tilted defenses, or if he's just running ball screens against someone. So if you're able to get Dame, it just changes the offense, and you trust the body of work that Eric Spoelstra has built across his career to cobble up a top 10 or better defense.
Those are my thoughts as well. And regarding the Hero thing is Tyrese Maxey, although I like Maxey better than Hero on the whole, you can make similar comparisons to how Maxey really popped off once it was Harden and Embiid, and Maxey was just attacking tilted sides all the time and was impossible. Raptors played him in the playoffs and he was scoring 30 points per game until they said, okay, wait, we need to reorganize things.
Yeah.
Hero, similarly to, and that's kind of what the Heat have done, and especially their first finals run post LeBron, was that they had a different leading scorer in every single series. It's leveraging guys as best you can, kind of making it guys who typically don't lead playoff series in scoring, Goran, Hero, Bam, manufacturing offense and doing a great job of it with Jimmy in the middle. Great job. But if Dame is there, it's so organic that it's hard to think of it as anything else. And also, as you say, Jimmy, Dame, and Bam is really complementary. Just you don't have to think too much about the machinations of it. These are really complementary skill sets. For anybody listening who wants the Raptors side of this, because the Raptors are apparently in on it, there will be a Raptors Portland podcast at some point where if Dame isn't gone, then we'll talk about it. But who do you think is guaranteed to go? What's the trade look like in your mind?
I mentioned the Tyler thing, if they're able to keep him. But I'm 85% sure he's going he has to go somewhere. I don't think he's going to Portland. I think if this is 3 teams or 4 teams, I do think Tyler's on that 3rd or 4th team. He's probably out. I would imagine Nikola Jovic is going to be out of there. Caleb Martin's probably out of there. And I guess if you are able to keep Tyler some kind of way, then I would admit Kyle Lowry, just by virtue of the salary and him being expiring, I think he's going to be gone. So I would say at least 3 of the 4, if not all 4, depending on how big the deal gets.
Pretty underwhelming for Portland fans, but I guess that's why it has to be a bigger trade than just 1 and 2. Yeah. Interesting stuff with Dame, of course, but putting Dame to the side, this was a team that played in the finals just a few months ago. You've obviously been paying a ton of attention to the WNBA, but for a lot of fans who just watch the NBA, they are just fresh on their mind is that it was Nuggets versus Heat. That's one of the best teams in the league. They're returning. What do you think of their prospects this year without adding anything, radical? If Dame never says a thing, just
Mm-hmm.
keeps like 4-bar Friday, axe to the grindstone. I'm here. I'm a loyal guy. What do you think the situation is for Miami?
I think they are a slightly better team, which I guess would be maybe a little bit controversial. But I think if you were factoring in, because I mean, losing Gabe Vincent, I think that does hurt. And I think losing Max Strus can't hurt. But if you are getting Duncan Robinson back in the rotation and the shooting is just back for him, in combination with what he's been able to do in terms of growing as a dribble handoff guy, being able to toss in that slip pass to Bam and stuff like that, like I don't think the drop between Strus and Duncan Robinson would be big. If you get a healthier Kyle Lowry, whatever that looks like at this stage of his career, I don't think you miss Gabe Vincent as much as you think you might. You add Josh Richardson to the fold, gives you a little bit more depth in the wing room, someone that can space, someone that can attack a closeout, take 2 dribbles and knock down a pull up, and someone that can credibly defend 2 or 3 perimeter positions. I think that helps. And again, if Tyler Hero is just healthier, a lot of the conversation about the offense may be different if he's just in the lineup and knocking down those threes and knocking down those pull-ups. And so again, everything's health dependent in the NBA, so that's a very obvious caveat. But like, I do like the roster. He did try to address their backup big issue because Heat fans will tell you how they felt about the Dwayne Dedmon minutes and then later the Cody Zeller minutes, particularly in the playoffs or as we got deeper into the playoffs. And so, like, I understand the flyer with Thomas Bryant. Like, I'm not a huge fan because if you were complaining about Zeller or Dedmon's defense and you're adding Thomas Bryant to the fray, I just want you to pump your brakes on what that's going to look like. But offensively, at the very least, he is someone that is a really good screener. He can hurt you on the offensive glass. He is someone that is a credible shooter inside the arc and also has flashed the ability to knock down above the break threes, which are more valuable than those corner threes that people want Bam to eventually take.
He's
And
slick,
so,
man.
yeah, so like I can see the avenue for this just being a better team, at least in the regular season. You may still run into some of the same postseason questions. Does Jimmy Butler have his 3 randomly for 2 weeks? If not, what are you going to do against these unders? Or depending on the matchup, what happens if you just switch to Jimmy Bam pick and roll? What's going on there? How reliable will Kyle Lowry be as a pull-up shooter from night to night? Tyler Hero, if teams do commit 2 to the ball against him, it's a good thing that you're getting that extra attention from him, but can he actually handle that? Can he make the passes necessarily, and can he make those decisions quickly enough so that he can actually play advantage basketball instead of it being a theoretical advantage? Like, those questions may still persist, and so through that lens, I could understand some of the frustration from Heat fans if this trade doesn't go down. But I do like where the roster's at, and if you are getting more growth from Bam, if you're getting more growth plus better help from Tyler Hero, if you're getting some of these younger guys, Haywood Highsmith flashed some really fun stuff defensively last year. If he's able to generate anything consistently offensively outside of the cutting, then I think you have a pretty versatile defensive piece that can add some value for you. Like, I'm not low on this Heat team.
No, they were just in the finals. They didn't lose.
Yeah.
Like, they lost a couple guys, but you mentioned advantage basketball. The Raptors haven't played that much of advantage basketball.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think of. I know you're well aware of the roster. I know you're well aware of the ongoings, the machinations of the offense.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on an offense that has been bottom 5 in the half court the past 2 seasons and just took away the guy? And I know Raptors fans think it will be better. If it is, great. But Fred VanVleet is gone. He had a bulk of their offense as far as points per possession, successful offense for that team.
Mm-hmm.
He's gone now. Dennis Schroeder comes in. Jalen McDaniels. Does that interest you? How do you think the offense turns out?
I have some pretty big questions about the offense, saying some other move happening. Like, I do think, like, there are very few, because I think Fred is just flat out a better basketball player than Dennis Schroeder. I'll say that off rip. But, like, I do get the credence to, you will get a little bit more pace with Dennis. You will get more consistent rim pressure with Dennis. And I think you get better finishing at the rim with Dennis. And I don't think there's going to be a massive drop between the two in terms of just pure point of attack defense. Now, the switchability, because of how strong Fred is, that's probably going to take a bit of a hit with Dennis. But like, I can see shades of where he may help them. But it's hard to overlook the lack of a reliable like pull-up threat, the lack of a super reliable playmaker among the guard room right now. And if you are turning things over to Scottie, how much spacing have you really surrounded him with? And even with some of the inverted stuff that you want to do, like I've seen Dennis like screen for LeBron and stuff. Like it's not the same as what you were going to get with Fred in terms of the effectiveness of the screen or the quickness of the ghost, and then also just the pure shooting threat if he is ghosting those screens. And so like I don't really love it on paper right now. Like this is very much I would like to see some preseason games just to see what the offense actually looks like schematically, and then we can go from is the personnel fit to do it or whatever. But I at least want to see how differently it looks from last year before I firmly say this offense is going to stink. But I'm not super enthused right now.
The big thing for Dennis is that objectively, I think he'll be much better on switches and on broken plays. The big problem that the Raptors had all last season, and it showed up once, in the play-in game when the Bulls decided to start switching Vooch onto Fred, is like, oh, Fred, he's dealt with a lot of injuries. He's a small guard. Whether he gets it back in time for the Houston contract or whether, it takes him a little while, or maybe he's a different player for the rest of his career, who knows?
Mhm.
But Vooch stepped out on him repeatedly, and they could not create on those because Fred couldn't turn the corner. Dennis turns corners. That's like his
Yeah.
job. I will turn the corner. Right turn, left turn, through traffic, on a yellow light, the red as it's expiring, whatever. Like he'll make the turn. And that is an exciting prospect for many people, especially since, and like here's the funny sneaky thing, Kyle Lowry has been, you could argue yourself that over his time with the Raptors, he was the best point guard in the Eastern Conference over that time.
Mm-hmm.
People will disagree with that. That's fine. But what the Raptors haven't really had in a long time is like this athletic, bursty guard.
Mm-hmm.
And so even from an aesthetic point of view, Dennis is going to offer something much different than what the Raptors are used to. Even Gary Trent Jr. is not like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Norm was like that, but they let him start for like 15 games and then traded him. And even he had a pretty good pick and roll season actually on low usage before he got traded. But this is tangential. Disregarding all that, they have to try and create that space. What do you make of that front court situation? Jakob Poeltl, Pascal Siakam, Scottie Barnes, elite passing. Like as far as a front three, maybe the best in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't include Jokic, but all those guys really slick.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make about how they can carve out spacing or try to make things work with not traditional spacing, but gravity off of screens, big guys cutting like off of some guy's face towards the bucket, higher catch points while in motion downhill? Like you really got to get down to the nitty gritty.
Mm-hmm. Can I throw out a WNBA comp for you?
Hell yeah.
I think they should watch a lot of Dallas Wings film. The Dallas Wings very big across their front court. Statistically, they were the worst 3-point shooting team in the W, and yet they were a high-level offense because of what they did on the offensive glass and what they did with a bunch of post-ups. And something that I have been noting kind of on my timeline, recently wrote about it with their offense ahead of like their first-round series with Atlanta, is that despite not having like good shooters, and in theory you could just sag off of these players, they do such a good job of like lifting the corners or clearing aside to set up their post-ups. And so, like, even if you want to send help, it's pretty elongated help if you're trying to send it. And so, like, I think that may be how Toronto has to go about it to set up some of their high lows and just set up some of their inside out offense, is to get real particular with, okay, we're going to have everyone above the wings right now. It then set up this low post play, or we'll let Scottie go to work. And if we want to go into split action from there, or if we just want him to attack a mismatch, we got to do it that way because we don't have the traditional 3 spacers around him or 4 spacers around him. I think they have to get real particular about doing it that way. Now, the NBA, like you can just cover so much ground defensively, so it may not have the same effectiveness as Dallas. My guy Steve pointed this out on the podcast recently. Like the Wings were the second best offense in the W post All-Star break, and that was slightly below the New York Liberty and slightly ahead of the Las Vegas Aces, which just set the W record for the best offense in league history. So it may not be that, and it may be the Raptors go from 25th in offense to 22nd or whatever, just throwing random numbers out there. Sure. But like they have to manipulate spacing in that kind of way. I think Dallas could be an interesting comp for them.
That is an interesting comp. Like lifting the corners, empty side stuff they've done that before and they've found success. Like as you said, elongated help. Big help means big reads. If there's a guy who's one pass away, who's constantly like darting in and out and not giving you anything, the help is not a big deal. Like, you can just bother somebody's post up, especially if there's a live dribble, right? Pascal Siakam pretty good at escaping that stuff and, reinitiating. But as far as if you can make that help super long, then you should feel pretty good, especially about Scottie. He has the most zip on his passes. He's the best, like, he's the most talented passer there for sure. If there are advantages being born out of the post up, I think he'll be a bit of a wizard out of it. Otherwise, you really have to be, if you're running anything, I guess, in the framework of offense that's kind of conservative, traditional, pick and roll stuff, you have to make where you put Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, Otto Porter Jr., Grady Dick, these guys, they are a rotating cast of very specifically placed pieces. What do you make of that role for OG upcoming this year? Again.
Oh boy, what does OG make of the role of coming this year again?
you want the sources?
Not great. Yeah, like, I just don't know how you. It's such a weird dichotomy because, like, one, just with him, you want him to explore space, but, like, also we've seen some of the footwork and some of the lower body strength with the drives, and it's just like, well, it's not super tenable for 60 plus games a year and 20 plus possessions guaranteed a game. But, like, also, this is someone that he is better than stand in corner and shoot. That much is very true. I don't know how you balance that. And then you zoom out to the team context. Hey, man, if we're giving you these touches, that means it's only Gary Trent, depending on the lineup, that means it's only Gary Trent Jr. spacing. We can't really afford to let you explore the way you may want to, or even the way that we may feel we want you to, because we just don't have enough on the perimeter to supplement if you are now posting up. And now you're just getting help from everywhere.
The thing is, too, is that OG is capable on empty side stuff often because he can create in the big open spaces with the ball in his hands. Ask him to navigate tight spaces.
Yeah.
Hey, not great. That's where the trouble comes.
Yeah, it gets really tough for him. Actually, if I can rewind a bit, can I hijack your podcast for one question?
Yeah, hijack it.
Just talking through, like, some of the Scottie stuff and also Dennis. I ask you, since you have written probably 12,000, 15,000 words on Scottie, everything Scottie at this point in his career, how do you feel about Scottie as, one, a screener, but two, as someone that can, like, flip angles and stuff? Like, how is he good? How good is he at that particular aspect of screening? Because I think that's going to play a big part in how successful, like, the Dennis Scottie pick and roll may be.
Traditional screening, not good at all. Has a lot of trouble placing himself between ball handler and defender. Dribble handoff stuff, you never know why guys succeed at things more inherently, but dribble handoff stuff, he's better at planting. As far as, like, the rescreen, the flip, and, like, really carving out angles to create driving lanes and, like, more to make sure that, like, if a guy is gonna stab step, he's actually moving up to meet that step. So you create, like, this chasm between ball handler and defender. He doesn't track that stuff. But again, he's, like, second-year player who is a self-professed point guard. This isn't stuff he's worked on extensively. He has a pretty good sense of it on dribble handoffs. The other stuff needs work, for sure. But yeah, it's something I would expect him to be quite good at on his second contract, or I would hope he'd be quite good at it on his second contract. And then on his first contract, I think mostly he's leveraging these situations with the fact that he's a really tremendous playmaker and also the keeper aspect of dribble handoff stuff. But just a rote, I run up and I'm there for a screen, not great. The Raptors, there's a reason why they traded for Pirtle. Precious Achiuwa and Scottie cannot land screens. They just have a lot of trouble with it.
Yeah, Precious just getting out of there. And, like, I get it, but, like, also, dog, I still have, like, the early Miami stint in my head. It's just like, dog, please.
Well, we haven't talked Precious really on any of these podcasts so far. You have, even though he's now been with the Raptors for longer at this point, but you've seen Precious with the Raptors. You've seen his great run at the end of 2021-22. You've obviously checked in to keep seeing what was happening last year. Actually very disappointing relative to, progression isn't linear, but when it's going up, you're like, hey, cool. What are your thoughts on him in what is now a very crowded front court?
Which
doesn't matter because he's a shooting guard, of course. So
I kind of worry about it. And I think this is where like having the new head coach that is also like secure for 4 or 5 years helps. Because on one hand, it's like, okay, you have time to kind of explore and see what he can do. He probably has more leadership. Like if Nick Nurse was still there, like I would just be super worried that Precious just doesn't play very often because it is coaching for my job time and we got to figure this out. And we just lost Fred. We can't afford to throw away any more offensive possessions because we don't have Fred.
He was so rude last year, man. He was so rude to Precious in the media. Anyway, go on.
No, but like since the new coach is in there, like I do think he has room to kind of bounce back. And one, let's see if we can prove if that shooting at the end of 21-22, let's see how real that actually is. And if you're able to more consistently parlay that into I can shoot or I can drive past your big because I'm faster and actually have some ball skills. And being able to explore from there, I would also like for him to like discover the X button or the A button if you're an Xbox player. So like that would be a cool thing to kind of add into that shoot or drive aspect of his game. But like I think there's some room for exploration there. And then defensively, like he's still fun. And so like he is someone that can switch a bit. He's had some fun flashes at the rim. Like I wouldn't call him an elite rim protector or anything of the sort, but like you can see where that can go. And so I'm curious just to see like how much leash he gets this year.
Mm-hmm. You bring up the most intriguing parts of his game is like attacking closeouts. He was detonating every second game on somebody with a highlight during post All-Star break 2021-22. He also shot 44% from three on like I think it was 3.6 attempts per game.
Yeah.
And he's a bench player or, a 22-25 minute per game player. So that's like per 36, like almost 5. And like, it's all catch and shoot. He's doing a pretty good job lifting, forming up to drives. You're like, what the hell? Who the hell is this guy? The
Big
Raptors
wing.
run was tenable because Pascal obviously came back, found his stride and was insane. But also that Fred was injured and shooting bad. Gary had an elongated slump. And somehow the ball kept finding Precious Achiuwa for threes that were made. Now, is that something that continues going forward? God, I hope so. Because if, like, now maybe this is my little Raptors hat on, but I think he's one of the 10 or 15 most athletic players in the league. Strength, that foot speed. Like, he's tapping, he's sliding with guys like Trae Young, flipping the hips, pop, hitting it off the backboard. Like, it's really impressive. And then also strong enough to kind of like stick with Luka and Jimmy on their Giannis on their strength creation stuff. And then obviously like his dunks speak for themselves. It's all very like the pump and like get skinny, throw a head dribble, come down the lane, pop. I'm obviously excited just talking about it. The problem is that I think I got like 3 of those plays last year to get excited about.
Like for every one of those, it is, hey man, 2 people are open. What are you doing?
There's the catch at 16, the survey over 3 seconds, dribble out to 25. There's 8 seconds left on the shot clock. You're like, hey, what the hell's going on this possession? There's a lot of that. I'm very interested, and with Koloko having a really promising rookie season, him being more traditional and easy to just throw him at the 5. There's no question marks about it. You have Chris Boucher in the front court who gets paid like double-digit millions. I wonder if he's the odd man out. You have Jalen McDaniels who's going to try and provide all of his promise, of which there's much, but we'll see how much of it converts and conveys. You have Otto Porter Jr., who maybe you play him up. You have Scottie Barnes, Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl. It's like, how the hell does anybody play in this front court? And Precious has to find his way there, which is why the shooting guard thing, I don't know.
Hey, man. Also, have we just not heard anything else on, hey, Gary's getting that extension? It's just...
Oh, the Raptors don't sign guys. That's not something they do.
I was like, this is an interesting, like, first...
Pascal, OG, Gary, all expiring. We don't talk about it. We'll see, man. It's been an interesting set of decisions. And, nobody here makes decisions of that gravity. It's fine. And nobody knows until things are done. But in reference against NBA history, having 3 guys and a lot of money expiring is typically not a good indicator. Of course, you could be like, trust in Masai, it'll happen, it'll get done. And once it's done, it'll look better than you ever imagined. And that's fine if anyone wants to do that. But then you look at, NBA history and you're like, 3 expirings is like not usually a good indicator, especially when those guys take up like 40% of the shots on the team. What's happening here? You look a little closer, you wonder about things. What do you make of it?
I think it's just odd. And it kind of feeds into the general what direction do the Raptors want to go in type beat, because that's what's made the offseason kind of odd. And it's like, okay, if they're losing Fred, they're going to trade Pascal, they're going to go younger, they're going to just try to reconfigure this around Scottie. Cool. Or, all right, we want a new voice in here, but we're bringing Fred back. We're going to sign Pascal long term because he's been an all NBA level player for multiple years. And let's see if we can reconfigure this thing with a new voice, a new vision offensively and figure it out. Cool. Right now, it is we have lost Fred. Everyone's here but not signed. There's been no real trade rumblings outside of the Pascal Atlanta stuff, but then that got quiet. And now we are a week and a half, 2 weeks from camp. What does this mean?
It's very interesting. They just hired Ben Uzo as a pro scout. That's meaningful.
That's a
he
name.
He had the triple double that moved them. Like, he won a game with the triple double last game of the season, moved them into a tiebreaker that moved them from Dame, Harrison Barnes into Terrence Ross. So maybe, this is serendipitous. Maybe they're about to shake things up. Ben Uzo is the bellwether for change as ever. I don't know what it means either. I guess something I'd ask you as somebody one of the preeminent, analysts, people who look at, okay, what's happening on the floor and how coaches impact that, especially since you spend so much time in proximity to people who think that way. We, as analysts, you and I, we try and just leech off of other people, like teach, learn, etc. Mm-hmm. What do you make of Darko, first-year head coach?
I'm pretty excited based on like the things that I have seen / read, like listening to you talk about it. I was like, okay, this seems to be like, in theory or like philosophy wise, this seems to be like my kind of guy. And then I look at what the roster is. And I'm just like, okay, how exactly does this all fit? And I think him having as much experience as he has and his general ability to adapt, like obviously I'm not like in the room, so I don't know, but like if you're selling him as someone that has learned a bunch under a lot of different voices, has his own philosophy, but has shown the ability to adapt based on what he has, that gives me some, that gives me a level of, the word is escaping right now, some optimism. There we go. It gives me optimism that he'll be able to be creative and figure some stuff out. So like, I do like the hire, but at a certain point, like the personnel does matter. You just can't give him this many bigs and a dearth of shooting and a dearth of pull-up shooting specifically and expect the Raptors to jump to like a top 10 offense within 2 years. I don't think that's a fair expectation of him. It's not a fair expectation of the players. Like if Scottie doesn't become a 20-point per game scorer in year 3, as everyone expects the general year 3 leap for high level prospects, is it his fault if he's operating in a phone booth? Not really. And so I would like expectations to kind of be tempered in that regard. But like, I like the Darko hire. I like what he stands for from what I've been able to see. Again, very much outside. And considering I'm not like in the Raptor bubble, like I'm not even as close to it as like you are. But like, it seems good. I just want to see like how the theory meshes with the personnel.
It'll be a shame if he gets fired for stealing secrets from the New York Knicks, I suppose. But it's true though, right? Like that adaptability is a real thing. You can look at his self-professed ideals and that they are different than what he helped design the offense for in both Phoenix and Memphis. And because the personnel there, like he looked at what they were doing in Phoenix and he's like, oh, I want to run a bunch of pick and roll. I've been stewing on this and I think I have a really good idea of how to approach this. And then you look at, well, it's Devin Booker and you have Ricky Rubio on ball. It's like, okay, we need to work through a lot of like handoff stuff and we need to keep a lot of stuff above the break and then start turning corners and making decisions from there. And it's like, okay, then he was able to sell Devin Booker on that style. And then 5 years later, Devin Booker has built out, really built himself out of that type of offense. The Suns went on to build what is now like a monstrosity of stardom, of course, but a lot of success doing so. And you're like, wow, this is pretty cool. Memphis with Ja as a lead ball handler, some of it is going to be traditional, of course, but there are quirks that you have to fit in and build in, especially with the different big men that they've played with over that time, like Jonas and Steven Adams, to make those guys work. And especially considering that, like, sure, they had one good year of shooting with Jaren, but mostly they'd been playing, the Grizzlies with not that much spacing on the floor until they get to their transitional lineups. You
Mm-hmm.
look at the Raptors, they're different, of course, but as you said, the dearth of shooting, trying to, put the big brain hat on and figure your way around it. It's something that, you hope Darko, you can't solve everything, but you hope that you weaponize things that beforehand had not been weaponized. And maybe that's more downhill cutting, which would be like the only thing, because that would be new, because the Raptors have leaned into offensive rebounding. They have leaned into, mismatch hunting. They have leaned into playing big and bashing dudes and transition and all that kind of stuff. And the personnel on this roster screams get turnovers, play defense like demons, and just like bash smaller guys, which has been kind of what
What
the
it's been.
Raptors have been doing. I guess the defense is the only difference over the course of the season, but they were already more conservative by the end of Nick Nurse's, I guess, tenure. That's actually something I want to ask you about.
Okay.
What did you make of the end of the Nick Nurse tenure? Thoughts?
Like, honestly, I was so just like enamored / confused by the offense that, like you mentioned, like they did get more conservative defensively, and that's true. But like that was something that was very much secondary on my radar, and like I wonder how much of that was an actual shift from Nick, and I wonder if that like carries over to the Philly stint, or if it was just we're tired and we got to do something else. We got to simplify some stuff for some of the younger guys. And so like that's kind of how I approached it. Like I wish I had deeper thoughts on it so I can sound like super smart and stuff. But like again, I was just so thrown off by like what is this offense running and like why is Raptors Twitter bickering again and et cetera, et cetera.
Raptors Twitter always bickers.
Well,
That's the way it works.
right.
Honestly, though, I think this is probably something you've noticed too. Raptors Twitter, the understanding of it, I think it's much different now. It's changed over time. I think like some people have left as the team has waxed and waned, and I guess the Twitter era of that type of, I don't know, fan base is maybe different now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like it's more segmented. It used to be that like everybody. Now this wasn't something I participated in, but like everybody I knew was like the badge in 2K dunk contest, quote tweet dunks, like Monday through Sunday, like every day, wake up, search for the reporter who slandered the Raptors in some form or fashion. And like maybe it's a reporter, maybe it's somebody who's just popular. Everyone is like, I'm taking off. I'm
Yeah.
Vince Carter, 2001. Like I'm going for it. That was what it was. Now I don't think they have the juice. It's too easy to be like, what's going on with your team? Probably. Something I want to ask about though, with the Heat,
Mm-hmm.
and I know, like they were in the finals, and you think they might have a better chance this year. They somehow manage repeatedly to populate players starting their career without playing a game who have shot 56 of 111 from three. Who might that be? Is it Hawkes? Is it Kevin Love after a transformation of sorts? Like what's happening with the shooting? Who do you think is the next prospect for that to happen?
Geez. Like, honestly, I need to see what the roster is going to look like game one of the regular season. But like some of the, like Drew Peterson was fun in summer league. Like some of the guys that they had on their summer league roster, I think that's kind of where I land. If you can get any sort of consistent shooting from Jamal Cain, or again, Haywood Highsmith's probably going to be the big one, where it's like, oh, he's just in the rotation this year, huh? Wait, who's this guy shooting 37% from three on like 3 attempts off the bench? And there may be like a national media reckoning of like, oh God, the Heat have done it again. And I'll just be in the corner like, well, he played last year. he had that game against the Hornets in January, but that's just how my brain works. So I guess like among the young actual known rotation pieces, probably Haywood Highsmith would be the guy that pops as a reliable shooter. The guard room, I think that's just going to be a big TBD depending on like what happens with the trade. Because like even some of the guys that they may get from the summer league roster or from their G League roster from last year, it may not matter if the Heat like sign another point guard. If they add Dame but then sign another veteran point guard, like Goran Dragic has been linked to them. And Goran Dragic that man loves Miami more than some people that live in Miami, I would imagine. So like if it just becomes like Dame Goran, then it's like, well, that takes some of the minutes away from whoever might be that random, like the Gabe Vincent type that pops out of nowhere. So like I don't know if like Drew Smith becomes a guy that pops or something like that.
It would be interesting. I like a Dame Goron would be a really, really funny to just have them like, we're in Miami again. You know, we've lost 3% body fat between the two of us. We're ready to go into battle. Last question, I think. Bam Adebayo. I think a guy who, you know, it's tough to regulate and create the hierarchy of decision making when you're good at a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when, as you mentioned, the Miami offense, he's the hub, of course, but also some of that hubbiness can turn into in the playoffs, like, okay, you know, they reject it, push him downhill, pivot facing the basket, do something. Like, you're more athletic than the guy in front of you. There's a way for you to worm your way into a good shot. You just have to do it like 16 times tonight out of that specific area. Bam, I think it was, you know, maybe like way too early to take, but after his first playoff run, I think I tweeted out this years ago. I was like, this guy's making the Hall of Fame. This guy just plays like tremendous basketball. He wins. I think he's going to find his way there. Now, I like, maybe that would be cool. I'd love that. But what do you think is left for Bam, who still seems like he has development sitting there? Like, there's food on the plate to eat. What do you think is next for him, the next step, etc.?
Next for him, I think we are in the, not that he's not going to try to add different elements to his game or anything like that, but I think we're kind of in the refinement stage with Bam, particularly offensively. It's like, okay, we know where your jumpers are going to come from. Like, as cool as it would be if he starts taking corner threes, or as the Heat run some delay stuff with him above the break, it'd be cool if he takes a three or two above the break. Like, it doesn't seem to be part of his package right now. Like, that feels very much like a year 7, year 8 thing, to where, you know, not necessarily the Brook Lopez renaissance where he's just shooting threes out of nowhere, but I think later in his career is when he's really going to start. I guess it's more of a Chris Bosh comp, to where he dabbled in it early, but really wasn't a consistent part of the Toronto years. And like, even year 1 in Miami, he wasn't taking a bunch, but by the end of his Heat tenure, and I hate the way that it ended, like, he was just a guy that stretched the floor in addition to everything else. So maybe we see that kind of late career thing. But right now, it's, we know you take mid-range jumpers. We know you can make them. Can you become a consistent 45% mid-range shooter? We know what kind of decision maker you are when you go to some of the mid-post stuff or some of the handoff stuff. Can you make those decisions even quicker? If you were going to hand it off, can you do it with juice? If you're going to fake the funk, can you do it with juice? If you're going to turn and face up, can you get to that? Is it one jab step and go versus catch, turn, jab step, survey, jab step again, and then go into something? And so I think that's kind of where it's going to be. And again, if the Dame trade happens and now you just expand what he can do in pick and roll, that's kind of all he needs. Like, he's already an all-star / all NBA caliber player right now, and is one of the 3 best defenders on the planet conservatively. And so if he gets an easier workload offensively, that gives him more room to do the defense stuff, or at least in theory gives him more room to do the defense stuff. And he may need to do more of the defense stuff if the point of attack becomes Dame and Tyler Hero instead of Gabe Vincent and Max Strus. He's going to have to work harder defensively, to be frank about it, but he may have more room to do that. If some of the pressure's taken off of him. So I'm just kind of looking at refinement. Decision-making, is it going to be, other decisions being made quicker? Is the mid-range jumper better? And what does that open up from there?
I want that stutter rip for him, man. Gaga, you know, that little, ooh, it'll be nice. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we've seen it in flashes, so that becomes a consistent thing. Like, Jimmy Butler's a really good stutter rip guy in particular. Like, get in the lab with Jimmy, have some fun with that. Slow-footed bigs just can't stick with Bam.
Yeah, driving bigs, I think, that's the next wave of great playoff creators. Like, I talked to Henry Ward about this, our dear friend Hank at Summer League. We were just gushing about, like, what if Jaren Jackson Jr. in a playoff series is just always applying the pressure with a live dribble? Because he can in spurts, and he's young. That's probably why, you know, Scottie and Pascal are so fascinating, despite not being quite the same size as Bam and especially not as Jaren. It's just like those guys. Joel Embiid is a really great example of, like, no fear, put the ball down, like, make guys just respond to it. You're a big body. And like there's a Kyle Lowry every once in a while to step in the lane, sure, but it's a lot to deal with, man. And Bam, if he fully, because he's so athletic, he's so quick, so fleet of foot, you know, make other guys try and like flip the hips and turn with you. Odds are they can't. And that puts you in maybe an uncomfortable position where you have to make like more of these downhill reads. You have to read guys pinching in, and you have to decide like whether they're stunting or whether they're coming all the way in. And maybe like it's that push pass with the one hand above the break, or maybe it's that two-handed to the corner. But like, it's more decisions, it's more responsibility, but God, he can move. And bigs who can move like that, man.
A lot of fun. And like, just on a complimentary note there, like, I also just want to see a healthier Bam. Like, I think that
Sure.
also just kind of goes under the radar with him because he will still play. And like, he's just playing with a bad shoulder, and he's playing with a gimpy knee, and he's playing with this ankle, and he's playing with something with the wrist. And it's like, we appreciate it. But also, when you're now 5 of 13 and Heat Twitter is like, why didn't he take 20 shots? Yeah, it's probably because he's switching 40 ball screens at 80%. Like, that's probably why. And so, like, I would also just like some of the workload to become easier for him, just so he doesn't have to deal with that. And if we get like a more consistently healthy Bam, like, the pretty box score numbers are probably going to look better. And it's going to be easier for you to tell your friends how good he is. And I think we just see more growth from him, period.
That's what it's all about, man. Is like, you have a favorite player and you want to tell your friends about him. If he's the type of player, like this guy's Paul George for years. Oh, like playoff P, pandemic P, all this stuff. I heard so much about it as a staunch Paul George defender. When he had that series against the Jazz, I felt like finally I can talk about this guy being the most aesthetically pleasing, coolest, on balance, dynamic wing like ever at his size. And it was 6'9", 6'10". But like, DeMar DeRozan was my favorite player growing up after Luol Deng. I don't know why I chose Luol Deng, but I was like, Luol Deng is
Hey,
sick, man.
Heat legend Luol Deng. We'll never forget him shifting to the 4 in 2015-16 and the Heat just taking off.
That's right. But DeMar DeRozan, like, he got clowned on, man. As you well know, you've seen discourse about DeMar, and just having to sit there and be like, well, I don't derive my meaning from playoff basketball. Like, it's like a tough thing. So yeah, be better so your fans can be boisterous and happy.
There you go.
This loops back to Raptors Twitter changing organically, I suppose. Any parting shots before we get out of here, Nekias?
I just want to say briefly, just kind of upset with Paul George, because like, one thing I have been stewing on over the last year and a half is like, I don't think people understand, like, one, how good Paul George is, but two, like, how historically good Paul George is. Like, this
Yes.
is literally like in terms of volume, and you add in the efficiency too, like, he's one of the best, like, one of the best shooters ever. And I don't think people talk about him in that light. Then you add in the defense, you add
He
in
hit the backboard once, so it's
yeah,
all erased.
it doesn't count. Yeah, it's just and I'm just like, man, I would love to be able to like talk to Paul George for like a story, or if I get him for 45 minutes on the pod, that would be super cool. Like, let's just talk about how great you are. Like, let's dig into stuff. And now he just has like the best player pod out there. It's like, well,
Yep.
shoot, man, he's just giving out all those thoughts now. Never mind, it's cool.
Yeah.
He's got it.
Maybe we get like the Tyler Tynes feature at some point. That might be the one that we need.
Yeah, we shout out Tyler. Yeah, we need it. I was like, dang, man, just taking my ideas off the table. Like, shout out PG.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Nekias, also fantastic. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed it. There's more of these to come. There's more in the rearview mirror. If you want to listen to any team, try to enjoy it before the season starts. Nekias, thank you, man.
Thank you for having me, man.
Happy to talk about the Heat, all the interesting players. Finals teams. Good teams are more fun than bad teams. Yeah. Sometimes bad teams, like I had a hell of a time talking Detroit with Jack Kelly. That's a fun team to talk about. But regardless, listener, thanks for tuning in. More. I said the whole thing already. Okay. Hey, we'll see ya.